Hello, everyone. We are live right now. Thank you all for attending another edition of the Open Masterclass by DB Services. I'm Douglas Bello, and today we have a very special guest, Nathan Harvey from DORA. Hello, Nathan. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. See you today.
Thank you for joining with us. Nathan is a developer advocate from the Google and leader of the DORA community. Um, and today we will talk about how DORA Metrics can help organizations drive software delivery with performance. Nathan, feel free to introduce yourself, and the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Douglas. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. As Douglas said, my name is Nathan Harvey, and I lead up a program at Google Cloud called DORA. DORA is a research program that's been running for over a decade now. And this research program really seeks to help teams improve their software delivery performance and improve all of their technical capabilities. I just want to make sure that you can see my screen now. Can you see that? There we go. I see it now myself. So we must be good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Douglas. I'm really happy to be here today and to chat with this community. And I want to start as a way of introducing Dora by asking a question. And this is really a question that's fundamental to the research that we do. And that question is this: how can your organization optimize value delivery from investment in technology and technologists? And this is really important. You know, we think about bringing in new technologies into our organizations all the time. And that is important. Technology really unlocks a lot for our organizations and for our teams. But it is important to remember that technology doesn't really work well or exist without the humans, the technologists that are here to help leverage that technology. And so we always want to keep the humans in mind. And we kind of have a human-centric approach to all of the research that we're doing within DORA. But really, in order to answer this question, how can we get the most? How can we optimize the value that we're getting out of technology and technologists? We need a couple of key ingredients within our organization. The first thing we need is a way to assess how we're doing today. You see, we can't improve anything if we aren't sure how it is right now. We need to understand what's our baseline. How are we doing today? And then once we have that in hand, we also then have to go through a process of prioritizing what we should work on next. Because the reality is that we all have more items that we want to get done then we have capacity to actually complete those items. And that's true whether we look at an individual or a team or even an organization. So we have to have some sort of prioritization framework in place. And then as we prioritize something to change or something to improve, we need some feedback mechanisms to tell us how that's going. Are the changes that we've put in place working? Or are they not? And if they are working, how well are they working? And if they're not, maybe why not? So that we can try something different. And probably most importantly, you need the organizational muscle and institutional culture in order to be able to repeat this process over and over and over again. You see, we're really talking about building a practice and an approach of continuous improvement. Or, as we on the DORA team like to say, we're here to help you and your team get better at getting better. This is where DORA comes in. And of course, you all know DORA, but this is not the DORA that we're talking about, of course. We're talking about a different DORA today. Maybe you know this one, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. This is another DORA, but not the one that we're here to talk about today. No, rather, we're here to talk about this DORA. This, in fact, is the DORA that we're looking for. For more than a decade, this research program has evolved far beyond its DevOps roots. It provides a scientifically validated framework for understanding and improving how we build and deliver software, which is critical for any organization aiming for high performance, especially in the context of things like platform engineering, generative AI, cloud adoption. The way that DORA runs its research is primarily through a giant survey that we run around the world every year. And as it turns out, right now, today, our survey for 2025 is open. So I would invite you to go ahead and scan this QR code or head to that URL, dora.dev/survey, and maybe just save that off to the side for now while you're listening to this presentation. But I want to encourage you to take this survey, not just so that our team can get data and insights into how you're doing, but also the biggest reason I think to take this survey is it really provides you a moment as a team and as an individual to reflect on how are things going in your organization on your teams today. By taking this survey, you will be able to discover potential improvements for your team. You'll also, though, help shape the industry's understanding of what makes top performance in 2025 and help create some benchmark data that you and your peers can use to help drive change. But this research really, and this survey in particular, is a really great moment to pause, reflect, think about how we're doing today, and most importantly, what might we want to change tomorrow. And I should point out that this survey is really meant for, well, just about anyone, whether you're a software engineer, a data scientist, a product manager, a QA engineer, or really anyone who participates in the creation and delivery of software. Your voice is critical in this survey. So, first, use this survey as a moment to pause and reflect. And second, thank you. Thank you for contributing and participating in this survey. In doing so, you're helping the entire industry get better at getting better. So we'll come back to the survey link at the end in case you haven't had a chance to get to it yet. But for now, we're going to move on because I've mentioned this word continuous improvement or this phrase continuous improvement a lot. And when it comes to continuous improvement, I'm a very firm believer in this sort of truism. You cannot improve what you cannot change. Just before we started, Douglas and I were talking about SLOs, service level objectives, and reliability. If you want to improve the reliability of a system, you can't do that by leaving the system alone. You have to change the system to improve its reliability. So whether it's reliability that you want to improve or features that you want to ship to your customer, scalability that you want to enable, maybe even sustainability of the applications that you're running, you can't improve any of those things if you cannot change those applications. And so it's really important that as teams, we build the capacity for change. And hopefully across our team and across our organizations, we're able to accelerate change. Why? Well, of course, accelerating change enables innovation, but change can sometimes be scary. We're afraid sometimes to change things because, well, frankly, we've been burnt in the past. We've changed things and seen things go off the rails. Things go bad when we make changes. Maybe through a change, we introduce a bug, or maybe through a change, we introduce an outage or an incident on our production systems. But we really want to accelerate change so that we can build confidence in the changes that we're making. We also need to accelerate change so that we can navigate complexity and regulations that we're facing. Oh, hello, other DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. This is introducing new complexity and new regulations that some organizations have to follow. We can't follow those regulations if we aren't able to change. And of course, by accelerating change, kind of maybe paradoxically, we can reduce failure rates and the amount of rework that we have to do. But remember, I said the first thing we need is as we go on this journey is a way to assess how we're doing today. And so that leaves us a big question. How do you measure change? How do you measure an ability or your team's ability or an application's ability to change? Well, with DORA, we have a center of gravity around software delivery performance. So when we think about change, we're really thinking about how do you change an existing application or service that you're focused on, that you deliver for your customers. Those customers might be your fellow employees if you're on a platform engineering team. They might be end users of your business. In any case, we need to be able to deliver and measure that change. So how? Well, we start with throughput. We want to understand how much change can we move through the system. And DORA provides us two ways of measuring throughput. We start with your change lead time. And this is really a measure of how long does it take for a change to go from committed to the version control system and shipped all the way through to production. So we start when that change is committed and we end that timer when that change is in production and a user can use it. Think about some of the changes on the application or service that you work on. How long does that take? And then the next measure we have for throughput is deployment frequency. And this is really a count or a measure of how frequently are we able to push changes into production. Do we push changes into production on a yearly basis, maybe a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, maybe even a daily or hourly basis? We're able to push changes through. These measures can help us understand what's the overall throughput of our system. But speed isn't the only thing that matters. We also want to have measures for stability. And stability is really answering this question of when I introduce a change to production, does the production system remain stable? Or does all of this change incur or introduce a bunch of instability in that system? And so to balance out these two throughput metrics, we also have two stability metrics. The change failure rate. This is a measure of how many of those pushes that you made to production, those deployments that you made to production, caused an immediate response in a negative way. An immediate response like, oh my goodness, we have to roll back that change. Or we pushed forward a change and something went horribly wrong. We need to intervene. We have to get humans involved. We need to either roll back that change or maybe push forward a hot fix. This is something that was unexpected, but a failure happened nonetheless. Of course, we'd like that number, the change fail rate, to be 0%. But let's be honest, we live in the real world. Things break all the time. And so we just want to make sure that we have the right capabilities and the right experience to be able to encounter that change and recover from it. Which leads us to our last metric, the failed deployment recovery time. So when you do have one of those moments where you have to roll back a change or push forward a hot fix, how long does it take your system to recover from that bad deployment? And in this case, by system, I mean technology and technologists. It's not just the tools, not just the computers that fail, that recover from a failed deployment. It requires us, the humans, to help intervene and to guide that process. Now, taken together, these four metrics give us a really good view into how we're doing today. It allows us to see how our software delivery performance is. And in fact, these four measures can be used for any type of technology that you're delivering into a production environment, regardless of who the users are and regardless of what that technology stack looks like. So, some examples. This could be ways that you measure how change happens on your corporate website. Think about the static website or the front page, if you will, of your organization. How quickly are we able to deliver changes and what's the stability of those changes? But of course, it can get much more complex than that. Maybe you're a financial institution and you have a banking application that sits on a mobile phone. How quickly are you able to ship changes to that mobile phone and how stable are those changes? Maybe in that same financial institution, you have a mainframe application. What is the throughput and stability of that application? You see, you can use these measures for any type of technology that you're building, delivering, and operating for any type of customer. Now, the important thing to remember about these metrics, though, is that they're at the level of an application or service. We don't want to measure this at an organizational level. We don't want to ask how frequently, for example, does DB services deploy into production. We want to instead look at the various applications or services that make up components within that organization. So I want you to join me here on a little exercise that we're going to do. Maybe you just came along to listen, but I'm sorry, I'm going to give you work to do while we're here today. So the first piece of work that I want you to do is I just want you to think in your head and maybe write this down on a piece of paper or just have it ready in your mind. Think about where you work today. Think about the primary application or service that you work on. Just one application or service. Regardless of your role, what is the application or service that you know best? Okay, do you have that in mind? Have you written it down? Uh, think about that. You can put the name of the application into the comments if you like, but it's not really necessary. I just want you to keep this application in mind because now we're going to do a little exercise here. And I'm just going to switch which screen I'm sharing here. One second. Sorry, I know this is a little bit of an interrupt, but we're going to do it anyhow. All right. So now I'm sharing a different screen. Let's just make sure that you can see that. It's coming up now. Yes, here we go. I am on a website called DORA.dev. As you might imagine, this is where we share all of the information that we have and all of the research that we've done over the years. You can see that DORA is all about getting better at getting better. There's a couple of publications here, like our most recent report, The Impact of Generative AI in Software Development. But what we're going to do today is we're going to take the DORA quick check. So if you're on Dora.dev, and if you're not, I encourage you to go to Dora.dev now, scroll down and you can select the DORA quick check. Of course, you don't have to scroll down. It's also in the top menu item over here in the top right-hand corner, quick check. So I'm just going to go there. And here we see the DORA quick check. And together we're going to take this. So I want you to remember that application or service that you just put into your head. And I want you to answer some questions here. And I'm going to answer them along with you. So for the primary application or service that you work on, what is your lead time for changes? In other words, how long does it take for a change? That change could be a configuration change, it could be some code change. It doesn't matter what type of change, any type of change. But how long does it take to go from code committed to code successfully running in production? And just by way of example, I'll think of an application team that I used to be on. Now, this is not a team I'm on today. This was an application team that I worked on a few years ago. But in our team, we were practicing Scrum and we were doing 2-week iterations, and we would typically deploy changes at the end of each iteration. So in this case, our lead time for changes was somewhere between 1 week and 1 month. That's probably, that might be the same as your lead time for changes, but I don't know. You know your application. I want you to just go ahead and answer whichever number is appropriate there. Next up, we have our deployment frequency. So for the primary application or service that you work on, how often does your organization deploy code to production or release it to end users? And in the application that I mentioned earlier, as I mentioned that we were on 2-week iterations and we would release at the end of each of those 2-week sprints. And so again, my answer is going to be between, between once per week and once per month. Generally, we did deployments about twice a month. So that's my answer there. These are our two throughput metrics. Next up, we'll talk about our stability metrics. The first and the third question on our quick check is our change fail percentage. So for the primary application or service that you work on, what percentage of changes to production or release to end users resulted in degraded service? As an example, they led to service impairment or a service outage, and this is important, and subsequently required remediation. For example, required a hot fix, a rollback, or a fix forward or a patch. And I want to point out that this is so important because I don't know if you do this. I've worked in places sometimes before where a release goes out with what we might call known issues or known bugs. We know this release isn't perfect. We've decided to ship it anyway. And we're going to fix some of those known issues or bugs in our next release. This is not a change fail. A change failure happens when you ship to production, something unexpected happens that requires you to take immediate action. You're going to require a hot fix or a fix forward or a patch or something along those lines. So what is the percentage of deployments over time that require that? I'll be honest with you, the team that I was working on, we would roll back or push forward a hot fix for about a third of our deployments. So I'm just going to set this to 33. I'm going to be very precise here. Close counts, though, of course, in these measures. And then finally, our last stability question is how long does it take to recover your failed deployment recovery time? And so again, I'll just read the question to you. For the primary application or service you work on, how long does it generally take to restore service? after a change to production or release to end users results in degraded service, for example, lead to a service impairment or service outage, and then subsequently requires remediation, again, a hot fix, a rollback, a fix forward, etc. So how long does it typically take to recover? Well, we were rolling back about a third of the time. We got pretty good at that. Usually it took us less than a day, sometimes, usually maybe even less than an hour, or oftentimes less than an hour. But if I'm being honest, and of course I am being honest, sometimes it took a couple of hours to get that fully back to working. Okay, so now perhaps you've done this on your own, thinking about the application or service that you have. What I'd like to do next is we're just going to click view results and sort of see how did you end up. Now, if you're brave and feel like sharing, what I would love for you to do is copy the URL of this page and share it in the comments. Say, hey, in the comments of this webinar, I took the quick check. Here's the results that I had for my team. Now, we won't necessarily know anything about the application or what, but we'll be able to see sort of what your performance score was. And you can see for me, for the team that I used to work on, my performance is about a 5.7. Now comes a really interesting question. Is 5.7 good or bad? Well, it's kind of unknowable. We can't say if 5.7 is good or bad because it's just the point in time. It's just a fact. This is what our performance looks like today. Now, I might want to improve that performance, or I might be happy with that performance. The thing that matters is not the performance as it is now, but how does it change over time? So I'm most interested in what will this performance look like 3 weeks from now, or 6 months from now? Hopefully that number is changing, and hopefully in a way that makes me very happy and my team very happy, of course. Okay, so I'm gonna once again I'm gonna shift what I'm sharing here. I'm gonna go back to the slides because I want to continue on with this discussion and talk about how does this help us. Okay, so we did the DORA quick check. As I mentioned, this helps us measure software delivery performance. Why measure software delivery performance? Well, what our research shows us is that software delivery performance is predictive of outcomes that we care about. For example, organizational performance and well-being for people on our team. In other words, our research shows that software delivery performance is a leading indicator for how well your organization is going to perform. Things like profit, customer satisfaction, revenue, and it's a leading indicator for the well-being of people on your team. And this is good. Well-being are things like job satisfaction and how productive do I feel in my job, and hopefully a reduction in the levels of burnout that I have. So I'm a happy, productive worker, and I'm enjoying the work that I do. That's what we want. But if software delivery performance predicts these things, maybe you can ask yourself this question: how would changing the unit of measure of those software delivery performance metrics impact those outcomes? So in other words, if like in my case, you were deploying between once per week and once per month, what if that week to month became days to weeks? So I was deploying between once per day and once per week. How might that impact the outcomes for my team and for my organization? So I want you to think about that and maybe jot down an answer, maybe share it in the chat, in the comments on the webinar. But just think about that for a moment. How would changing this unit of measure impact these outcomes? All right, I've given you a second to think about that. Let's continue on, because the other question that we have is, well, I want to improve that number. 5.7, I'm not happy with it. I'm not satisfied. I want that to be better. I want that to be a 5.8 or a 6.2. How do I get there? I don't get there by thinking really hard about software delivery performance metrics. Instead, I get there by improving the capabilities and conditions that I have on my team and within my organization. And the capabilities is a place where DORA does, again, additional sort of research. We look at things like a climate for learning, fast flow, and fast feedback. We find that as you improve these capabilities, your software delivery performance improves as well. So in other words, the software delivery performance metrics are lagging indicators for the capabilities and conditions that you have on your team and within your organization. So, in order to improve well being for members of your team, you might start by improving your ability to get fast feedback. And through that fast feedback, you'll see improvements to your software delivery performance, which might drive better well being, less burnout for the people on your team. So, again, one final exercise for you here with these metrics in mind and thinking about the entirety of your team, the cross functional teams that you work with, your organization. If you could change one thing tomorrow that would drive improvements to these metrics, what would that one thing be? Now, this is a great opportunity to share in the comments and in the chat. On my team, in order to improve these metrics, I think we should improve our, I don't know what is. That's up to you. That might be something like test automation. It might be something like your approval processes. I don't know. The reality is that it's probably different for you than it is for many other people that are watching this webinar. You see, it's important to take these metrics and this research and contextualize it, put it into your own context. So, DORA's research, again, looks into those capabilities and conditions. And in fact, we expand on them. We go a bit deeper than just these sort of high level categories of a climate for learning, fast flow, and fast feedback. And you can see some of those things here. For example, a climate for learning. What does that look like? Well, do we have maintainable code that's easy for us to understand and adapt over time? But also, do we have good documentation quality? Do we have a good culture that encourages sharing and learning across teams within our organization? When we think about things like fast flow, we think about, are we using version control? Do we have our deployments automated? But we also look at things outside of necessarily just technology. Things like our change approval process. Has that been streamlined? Or is it a very heavyweight change approval process? And then for fast feedback, we talk about things like test automation and continuous integration and pervasive security. Now, I wonder if the items that you wrote down, the one thing that you might want to change within your team or within your organization, I wonder how well they map to some of the capabilities that we've researched. And I'm going to just take one moment. I apologize to our oops, sorry. I apologize to the person running all of the systems behind the scenes because I'm going to switch my screen two more times here. So when we come back to this quick check that we saw before, one of the things that we have is we need to understand. Actually, let me look at one other thing here. I'm going to go over to the research and I'm going to show you that same model here. So we saw those software delivery performance were a 5.7. We want to improve them. We do so by finding which of these capabilities might be holding us back. Which one are we struggling with that we might want to improve? But the reality is there's a lot of capabilities here. So I'm just going to go back to that quick check and I'm going to scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see here that actually in the quick check, we give you an opportunity to assess 3 of those capabilities. In fact, we help you look at continuous integration, loosely coupled teams, and the culture of your organization. And we provide you a moment to reflect and sort of do an assessment. Now, this moment to reflect and do an assessment sounds similar to something I talked about right at the top, taking the DORA survey. And in fact, these questions are taken directly from the DORA survey. And you'll see that we don't just ask, do you practice continuous integration? Yes or no? Because maybe we all have different interpretations of what that means. So instead, we try to get to the heart of what is continuous integration. What are the characteristics that make that up? And how are those going on your team or with the application that you work on? So, for example, we say code commits result in an automated build of the software. Do you disagree with that? Do you agree with that? Somewhere in the middle, where do you fall? Now, we don't have time for us to really talk through each one of these questions. I'm just going to throw in some quick answers here just to demonstrate what we see within the quick check. So here's my answers on continuous integration. You should do the same, but maybe take a little bit more time than I am. Maybe carefully consider those questions. Let's look at loosely coupled teams. How are you doing there? On my team, we can make large scale changes to the design of our system without creating significant work for others. Yeah, I think that's kind of true. Again, I'm just going to throw in some random answers here. You should take a little bit more time and consideration with these questions. And then finally, organizational culture. On my team or within my organization, is information actively sought? Yeah. Messengers are not punished? Yeah. All of these things look pretty good. So again, throw in some random answers and we'll view the results. All right, now we're really getting somewhere. We can see by looking at this, we have a score for continuous integration, for loosely coupled teams, and for our generative organizational culture. And in fact, our continuous integration has the lowest score. So this is a really good insight that we can get from this research framework. Hey, if we want to improve software delivery performance on my team, continuous integration and improving our continuous integration practices might be a good place to start. And so I'm just going to click on that continuous integration link, which is great, showing up properly in the screen sharing. So on the DORA website, we actually give you a little bit more detail and background on each one of those capabilities. So for example, with continuous integration, well, and for all of those capabilities, they all sort of follow a similar model when it comes to the content that we provide. We talk about what that capability, in this case, continuous integration is. How do you implement that capability? What are some of the objections and pitfalls that you might run into as you try to build out this capability? And then, importantly, ways that you can measure this capability. This is really good. These ways that we can measure give us new things, new metrics that we can set up as a team. And this is interesting because now, as a team, we can decide that we want to improve our software delivery performance and that we're going to do so by improving one of those capabilities. So now we go back to our loop from the beginning. Let's assess, how are we doing with continuous integration today? We have a set of measures here that we can set. We can then, as a team, discuss, what are we going to do? What changes are we going to make? Whether they're technology changes or process changes or people changes, how are we going to improve these metrics? Let's watch them over time. And so at the end of the day, we should be able to sit down and essentially write a hypothesis. We believe that by improving our continuous integration practices, this is going to help us improve our software delivery performance, including things like our change lead time, which is going to lead to better commercial performance, profitability, market share, customer satisfaction, etc., for our organization, and higher productivity for our team. So now we've gone all the way through and written out a hypothesis. Now the hard work happens. Now you go and run that experiment. You try to see, as we improve continuous integration, are we actually seeing those software delivery performance metrics improve? And then are we actually seeing the organizational performance improve? All right. And with that, this is the last swap, I swear. Thank you to our folks in the background driving the correct sharing for us. I want to, yeah, let's see. All right, perfect. All right, so we're back here on our research. We've looked through this. I want to close out with a couple of ideas here. When we think about measuring all of these things, yes, we're measuring software delivery performance, but a big component of software delivery performance, and frankly, our technologists, the people on our team, is developer experience. We want to, and as an organization, we should strive to improve our overall developer experience. And that encompasses how developers feel about, think about, and value their work. This is really important. I said at the beginning that DORA really puts a human-centered look into how do we improve these technology-driven teams and organizations. It really starts with the developer experience. And in this case, you can swap out developer for anyone on the team. It could be the product manager. Product manager experience encompasses how product managers feel about, think about, and value their work. We want to improve the experience of all of our employees. And we need to do that by addressing these three components here. And then another thing, again, swap out developers for any role that you think, but developers are happier and more productive when they're able to complete their work without experiencing friction. and or while frequently achieving flow. Flow is sort of that optimal experience. It's where you're working on something and you're totally dedicated to the task at hand. Everything around you sort of seems to melt away. You lose track of time, you're not interrupted, you're just jamming. You're having a good time getting the work done. This is a place where we all thrive. We really want to be in that place where we have that optimal experience, where we're really experiencing that flow. Now, there's another really interesting thing here that in this particular quote, we talk about happy and we talk about productive. This always prompts a question for me. Are developers productive because they are happy, or are they happy because they're productive? Well, I don't think we should get into a deep philosophical debate here because I think the answer is yes. Happier developers are more productive, and more productive developers are happier. And this is easy to see, especially when you have an unhappy developer. And that gets to the green part of this quote here, without experiencing friction. If you want to find an unhappy developer, or an unhappy product manager, or an unhappy quality engineer, an unhappy insert role here, all you have to do is find one that is experiencing a lot of friction in their day-to-day work. That friction might be, how long does it take for a build to complete? That friction might be, how long does it take for me to get feedback on this change that I'm making? That friction might be, how long does it take for me to get a new idea into the hands of users so that I can experiment with it and learn from that experiment? We all experience friction. And let's be clear, some friction is necessary, but the more friction we have in our day-to-day activities and the day-to-day work that we're doing, trying to deliver real value to our business, to our customers, this friction really inhibits our happiness and our productivity. So as a team, it can be a really powerful thing to understand, where do we have friction between code commit and code in production? Where are the friction points? Where is the waste in that system? And as a team, let's make a commitment to go reduce or alleviate that waste and that friction. All right, we're coming up on time, and I want to make sure that we have some time for Q&A here at the end. So I want to close with a couple of thoughts. First, just a recap of some of the important insights and takeaways. DORA is a research program that is program and platform agnostic. It looks at how do technology-driven teams and organizations improve. Its center of gravity is around software delivery performance. And as such, it provides metrics for software delivery performance, a way for us to assess, how are we doing today with software delivery performance? And importantly, how does that change over time? Because improvement requires really understanding both how we change and what we might want to change, and measuring those things. DORA's research and the research framework can help you and your team identify practices and behaviors that can drive improvements. The focus is on throughput and stability metrics for change. Remember, once we've built an application, the very next thing we want to do with that application is change it. Because as soon as you put some new feature or functionality in front of a user, they have feedback on it. And they want to change something about how that application works. Our ability to respond to that and enable change really helps our users stay happy and helps our products improve. But change isn't just based on user feedback. As we said earlier, it might also be based on the reliability concerns that you have for this application. Maybe it's not reliable enough, and we need to improve that reliability. The only way we can do that is through change. Or maybe you want to decrease the carbon footprint that this particular application takes. Well, you can only do that if you can change the way that that application works. So there are so many things that change becomes one of the most critical components of any system that we have, our ability to change that system. And always remember that continuous improvement is the key to achieving the best success. We don't flip a switch and improve everything overnight. Instead, what we need to have is that organizational muscle and institutional culture to allow us to take small steps every single day or every single week. We want to run small experiments, see how they go, and keep moving forward. But the thing to remember about continuous improvement, well, I'll get to that in a second. The other thing I want you to do is remember how our research works. With DORA, we go out into the world and we seek insights from as many teams and as many organizations as possible. We have insights from around the world in organizations of every shape and size. And after this webinar, we'll have insights from you, because remember, you're going to take the survey to provide us some of these insights. But the reality is that as we publish our findings, we're publishing findings that we see across this broad sampling of technology-driven teams and organizations. But you have a particular context. You work within one organization, working to support or to build or to manage or to deploy one or two or five or seven different services or applications. So our findings might not fit exactly within your context, but I encourage you to use our findings as your hypotheses for your next experiments. And we saw an example of that as we went through the quick check. DORA found that continuous improvement drives software delivery performance, which drives better well-being for the people on our team. Now test that. Test that hypothesis, or test that finding as a hypothesis within your own context. We improved continuous integration. What were the impacts on software delivery performance? What are the impacts on employee productivity or well-being, etc.? So please replicate our findings and share your lessons learned back with us. And this is the thing I wanted to remind you of about continuous improvement. I said at the beginning, you cannot improve what you cannot change. And that's important to remember. But I also want you to remember that as we're changing things, we're really experimenting. And it doesn't matter what type of experiments you're running, experimentation will always involve a mix of both victories and failures. But as long as you take lessons from those experiments and use them to drive what you're going to do next, these meaningful actions can mean that this failure or a victory, either way, it's a success because you've learned something. You're taking that lesson and you're carrying it forward, driving this practice and mindset of continuous improvement. But another thing that's really important to remember is you cannot do this alone. Each individual only has so much impact and force that they can provide within an organization. So you want to work together with your team and with other teams within your organization, and in fact, with other people from organizations outside of yours. And this is something that is really at the heart of DORA. And this is our DORA community. The DORA community is made up of thousands of practitioners and leaders and researchers just like yourself. And we come together regularly to share and learn from each other ways that this research is being put into practice. What are some of the real world pitfalls that people are running into? What are some of the real world successes people are having by taking lessons from this research program? So I encourage you to join Dora.community. Again, there's a QR code, or you can go to the URL Dora.community. You'll see there's a button to join the community of practice. What do you get by joining? First and foremost, it's free to join, of course, and we welcome everyone that wants to be a part of our community. On the community, we have a mailing list, so you can participate in asynchronous discussions, but we also get together regularly for virtual meetings and discussions. And in those virtual meetings, this is where real connection can happen. They're virtual, which enables people from around the world to participate. And we really love the diversity of opinions and experiences that we are able to bring together. This helps us all learn and improve together. Now, as a final thing before we go to Q&A, I want to remind you and encourage you to take this year's DORA survey. You can get there at dora.dev/survey or by scanning this QR code. Use this survey as a moment to reflect. Think about how are things going on your team. Think about which of the questions gave you insights into new things that you might want to try. Which of the questions in the survey are things that you're doing really well and want to keep doing? And I really encourage you to use this survey like this. In your team, within your organization, have every individual take the survey and then come together for a discussion. Maybe this is a discussion over lunch or a coffee. But ask questions about what was your experience like through the survey? Are there things that stood out to you that seemed like these are good opportunities for us to improve? Are there things that stood out to you that are going really well on our team and we want to continue doing those? And most importantly, take a step back and think about everything that we asked about in the survey and all of the reflections you have. What's the one thing you want to try to do differently next week? Agree to that as a team and then go put that one thing into practice. Start your journey of continuous improvement, or rather, take the next step on your journey of continuous improvement. And that's what I have today. I want to say thank you so much. I'll just leave that survey QR code up for one more second in case you've not yet had a chance to scan it. But again, it's at dora.dev/survey. Go take a moment to reflect on how you and your team are doing. And with that, thank you so much for coming along. I want to stop sharing and we'll see what questions do we have. Douglas, do we have questions coming in from the audience?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Nathan. It's very nice insights. It's amazing to talk more with you about the DORA in engineering productivity. The first question, it's about the all guys talk about it, how to start using DORA.
Yes, how to start measuring DORA metrics. This is a question that we get all the time. And I hope that you've gotten at least some insight into one way to start measuring those DORA metrics. That's with the quick check on dora.dev. Now, here's the thing. I think that oftentimes people see these metrics and they they recognize we're engineers. I'm an engineer. I want a lot of precision in any measure that I'm going to make. That quick check, like it was just a form and the answers weren't very precise between once a week and once a month. That's not a very precise answer. I want to know, are we talking about 17.5 business days or are we talking about 19 business days? Because clearly those two numbers are very different. The reality is, as you get started, I say that the best way to start is with a conversation. You don't need highly precise data to get started. You need to get a common understanding of where you are. And the best way to do that is either through the DORA Quick Check or through getting together and having a discussion with your team. So one of the things that I really like to do with teams is bring the team together and pull up the quick check and have a discussion through those four metrics and really ask, what is our change lead time? Douglas, you may think our change lead time is 3 days. And the way I experience it, it feels more like 2 weeks. Wow, there's some big differences there. Let's have a discussion around which is like closer to reality, but also why do we have such a mismatch in our lived experience? This again can help us start identifying places where we want to improve. Now, that's the way you start. Over time, you may find that no, I want more precise data. And many of these data can come directly from systems that we're working with. We have logs and telemetry that we can pull out of systems. When you reach that point, then I highly recommend that you go out into the marketplace and find a solution provider that can help you. There are many commercial tools and open source tools that all work in this area of software engineering insights or software engineering intelligence. You can even find some of those tools on dora.dev. If you go to the resources page, we list some of the source available tools that can help you with measurements like this. But these tools all start with pre-built integrations into systems that you might already have in place. Systems like GitLab or GitHub, systems like Jira that you might be using for tracking your work. These tools will integrate into those and then build visualizations and dashboards to help you see those metrics. So start with a conversation, drive as much change as you can, because remember, the thing that matters is that you're improving how you're working. not improving the precision of your metrics. It's always that change in how you're working that is the driving force. So focus there, and then you can look at how do we improve the precision of those metrics.
Yeah, very nice. And another question, it's about AI, use the AI.
Oh, yes, excellent. How do you see DORA metrics evolving in the context of AI-driven development? Thank you so much for this question. In fact, there's a couple of resources that I'll point you to immediately. The first is that report that you saw on the homepage of Dora.dev, the impact of generative AI in software development. So I think that we have a bunch of findings right in there. And I think this is a really interesting question. I think the power of those software delivery metrics is that they are both lagging indicators for the capabilities and conditions you have and leading indicators for the outcomes that you care about. Now, when you introduce AI, what's changing? We still want to ship software. We still want to get that software to users. We want to get it there quickly and in a stable way, and we want to improve organizational performance. So I think those four software delivery performance metrics don't really need to change with AI, but we are certainly asking new questions as we bring in AI. As an example, as we bring in AI, how is AI impacting developer happiness or job satisfaction? How is it impacting burnout on our teams? These are very important questions and some that we've had a chance to dig into in our most recent research. And of course, these are areas that we're continuing to explore right now in the survey that you and your team are going to take later today.
Very nice. And we have another question. Oh, very nice question. It's about the metrics we like NPS or churn, and use
Yeah,
DORA.
Sylvia, really good question. How have we correlated the DORA metrics with other indicators like NPS and churn and so forth? Well, if we go back to that diagram that I shared with you, software delivery performance metrics predict organizational performance metrics. So, organizational performance might be things like NPS, your net promoter score for your applications. It might be things like churn, how many of your users are leaving, going away from your application. And what we see in our research is that as software delivery performance improves, so too does organizational performance metrics. They tend to move together. But as I reminded you towards the end, you should replicate our research. In other words, don't trust us. I want you to look at your own team's software delivery performance and those business metrics that you care about, like NPS and churn, and see, do they move together, both up and down? As software delivery performance degrades, does our NPS go down? One of the things that we've looked at in our research over the past few years is this idea of user centricity. And user centricity is really a measure of, on a software delivery team, how focused are we on the needs of our users? And the thing that we find is that the teams that have the highest levels of user centricity, that really care about things like NPS and churn, these teams tend to have not only the best software delivery performance, but also the best organizational outcomes and the best product performance as well. So being user centric really matters. And Sylvia, just that you're asking this question gives me an indicator that you and your team are, in fact, user centric and focused on the reason that we use this technology. It's not to play with new toys. All right, let's be honest. Sometimes it's to play with new toys because all this new tech is super fun to play with. But the reality is, we do it to serve our users and to further our business. And so this is really, really important. Thank you, Sylvia, for the question.
And another question about AI.
Yes, do you think DORA can be used to deal with problems like AI consistency and sloppiness? Daniel, I'm sorry that AI is giving you inconsistency and sloppy code. I think this is a place where you would see exactly these challenges starting to show up. In fact, what you might see is that as you adopt more AI, maybe your change lead times are starting to extend because you're getting less quality code. Or maybe your feedback cycles are starting to extend, get longer. In fact, in our research, one of the things that we found, and you can find this in that generative AI report, is that things like developer happiness and perceived productivity are improving, but actually software delivery performance appears to be suffering. Throughput goes down and stability drops off. Now, we don't know exactly why. given our research, but we do have a couple of hypotheses in the report. So I would encourage you to read that. And Daniel, yes, I think DORA can help us at least identify some of these issues if they are cropping up as we use AI or, frankly, any other new tool or practice on our team.
Great, great. And the one question about the report for this year, Nathan.
Yes.
What did what way you expect for this year in the report?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one of the challenges of being a researcher that really looks to what's happening in the industry. It's hard for us to make predictions. I don't want to predict anything until we've seen the data. That said, we of course have some ideas around what we might see based on just what we're looking for. This year, we're doing a very deep dive into the impact of AI. We're going even deeper than we went last year because, as you know, it's happening all around the world. Everyone is thinking about AI right now. In fact, some of our early returns on the survey that we ask questions like, are you using AI in your daily work? I think we probably don't need to ask that question because what we're seeing already is that high 90s, like 96, 97, 98% of our respondents say, of course, I'm using AI in my daily work. It's kind of like asking in a technology survey, are you using computers for your daily work? We are almost at the point where the answer is obviously yes. So we really are trying to understand not just are you using it, but again, what are the impacts and so forth. We also, of course, have a look into platform engineering, which is another topic of real concern in the industry, and sort of what are the impacts and how do we do platform engineering better to better scale and enable our teams. And of course, there's the continued look into the human aspects. How are we thinking about job satisfaction, burnout? Another one that is a nice relationship between AI and humans is something that was mentioned earlier. How much do you trust the AI, specifically the outputs of the AI? How much do you trust what's generated? This is a fascinating place for us to investigate.
Very cool. Okay, we reached the end of the another open masterclass. I want to thank you to everyone for coming, and especially Nathan for being available to talk with us today. Uh,
Thank you so much, Douglas, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I hope that you did do some of those exercises, at least in your head, along with me. And I wish you all good luck on your team. And thank you in advance for taking this year's survey.
okay, thank you guys. See you.